Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan McGuire, Director of Professional Development at ACCE. Welcome to today's webinar led by Anissa Starnes of ACCE and Swingbridge Partners, LLC. Anissa will introduce us to tools to identify, manage, and reduce stress under the unprecedented circumstances we're facing today, along with strategies to balance home and work life and resources to help you and your team navigate our new normal. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping reminders. First, as usual, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, after the presentation, we'll have time for questions, which you can ask by using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question, and I will read the question to Anissa after her presentation. If we run out of time and we don't get to your question, or if you have a question that you would prefer to discuss with Anissa individually offline or with anyone at ACCE, please feel free to contact her directly. Her contact information will be on the last slide of our presentation. If you type in a question that we don't get to, we will also do our best to get in touch with you afterwards, after the webinar, to answer your question. Third, the presentation slides for the webinar are uploaded to the webinar panel. Just find the box labeled handouts and click to download. I'll also post the slide deck along with the webinar recording if you would prefer not to download it during the presentation. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and it will be up on the ACCE website on the ACC University webinar page by Monday, May 18th, if not sooner. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce our speaker. Anissa Starnes is president of Swingbridge Partners, LLC, which specializes in partnering with chambers of commerce and nonprofits. She has more than 25 years of experience in supporting these organizations. Her passion is helping nonprofit professionals grow in their careers and helping organizations succeed. She also serves as an in-house consultant with ACCE, focusing on membership and retention. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur, Anissa served as Senior Director for National Organizations for Constant Contact, overseeing the partnership with 7,000 nonprofits. And before that, she was proud to be the CEO with Girls on the Run International. She's also held several CEO positions with multiple chambers of commerce. Anissa is a graduate of the University of Georgia's Institute of Organization Management and the South Carolina Economic Development School at the College of Charleston. So thank you so much, Anissa, for being with us today. And at this point, you can take it away.
Thank you, Susan. And hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today with us. And certainly thank you for taking the 1 hour out of your day that I know is very long right now, working a lot of hours, and appreciate you taking the time and spending that time with us today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself that's not on my actual official bio. I've been a fundraiser since I was 6 years old, much to the chagrin of my parents. I cleaned out our garage and loaded up a wagon and went around the neighborhood and sold every single one of my father's tools. And so at a young age, I learned the important lesson about refunds and having to return money that I had gotten. So I wanted to raise some money for something I wanted to do, so I went out and did it. So I've been a fundraiser for a long time, and I've been in membership sales since I was 9 years old, when I set up a cardboard table in the middle of the street and stopped cars and asked for money and sold them membership to be eligible to vote in that year's election. So I also learned at a very young age that you can't buy votes and you shouldn't sell votes. And I ended up volunteering at the Women League of Voters when my mother drugged me down there to teach me that lesson. And when I started in chamber world, I came straight from nursing school and went into a chamber job at the Charlotte Chamber and did not even know what a chamber of commerce was. And I suspect some of you on the phone started your jobs without really understanding as well. And here we are today. But the reason I'm doing this presentation today in this webinar is once upon a time, I was a big old ball of stress. And I have learned some great tips along the way through some great mentors and some valuable lessons that have allowed me to kind of curate some great tips that I have found valuable throughout my time that I wanted to be able to share with you today, because I don't need to tell any of you on this call today how stressful the world is today to be a chamber executive. We've been through a lot of things depending on how long you've been in the business, but we've been through recessions before, and we've been through valleys and peaks before, but nothing quite like this. So when we were talking about offering this to the ACCE membership, I jumped at the opportunity to maybe share my tips with you, and hopefully at least a couple of them will resonate with you, and that you'll be able to take them back to your lives and become a recovering stress addict as I was. And then last but not least, I'm an eternal optimist. I tend to see things as glasses full instead of half full. So I try to always look for the good. And these days, I'm just going to be real honest with you in that some days it's hard to find the good with all of the stress in the world and all of the worry, and the unknowns is the biggest part for me. But I'm still trying to say, we will come out of this, because I know we will. And even though the challenges are great today, there is so many opportunities for our chambers and for the communities that they serve. So if I could see you, and if we were in a room, I would ask you to all raise your hand. So I'll ask you to raise your hand wherever you might be. I know most folks are still working at home, but how many of you feel like today that your own personal check engine light is on? You're getting all the warning signs, you're feeling things that might not be normal to you. You're just stressed and your own check engine light is on. And what we tend to do there is just say, nah, it'll be okay. We'll make it through. We can keep on driving and we'll make time for it later. And unfortunately, sometimes later doesn't come and the engine shuts down. And so we don't want to do that with ourselves. We've got to put steps in place to take care of ourselves. So these are some of the things that over the last couple of weeks since we've had COVID, and over the last almost now, hard to believe, almost 3 months, but some of you might have heard these things with your staff. Some of these you might have even said yourself. I eat, sleep, breathe the chamber. If I don't do it, there is nobody else that will. My family just has to understand that working all of the time is part of my job, because I have to be on all the time. I work all weekend, so I don't have so much to do on Monday. I'm guilty of that one sometimes myself. It's just easier if I do it. And let's be honest, I'll do it better anyway. Insomnia. Um, I'm very active on Facebook, and I'm very connected to a lot of chamber friends. And I see this so often that people are just not sleeping. They're Facebooking in the middle of the night. They're up at 3:30 a.m. doing their laundry because they just can't sleep. And stress plays in such a big role into that. Some people even say, you know what? I can go on 3-4 hours of sleep. I don't really require that much. Chamber work, it's 24 hours, 7 days a week, year round. It's my job, and I should be on all of the time. And some of these things, I will self-admit that I have said some of them throughout my career, but it's so important that we really pay attention to those things that we say in front of our staff, in front of our family, in front of ourselves. That self-talk is so critical, and catching ourselves when we say things like this, and listening to what it sounds like, because the work that you do every single day is so critical and so important, more so now more than ever, but you're equally as important. And you've got to find that balance, if there is balance. I will tell you, for some of you that have ever heard me speak before, you've heard me say this, but I don't necessarily believe in balance. I think at any given time, we're work is a little bit more priority and maybe our home life is a little less. And then there are times that our home life needs to take priority and we have to back up from the work a little bit. And it's a constant juggle of trying to get to the balance, but I'm not sure if we ever really obtain it 100% of the time. But just paying attention to these things that we hear and things that we say is so critical to help us do better. So what I'd like to ask you to do today is wherever you are, however you're listening to this webinar, take out a piece of paper, write down 3 things. I'm going to give you about 10 steps. And you might not be able to hit them all out of the park, but write down 3 things that you would like to make improvement on or start putting steps into place to do a little bit better for you, for your staff, for your family. Just take the time to write down 3 things, and I would encourage you over the next 30 days to work really hard on just those 3 things. You know, we all know what stress is. I don't need to tell you today what stress is, but COVID stress is really unlike, I think, anything our generation has maybe seen before, in that the unknown is just, Susan and I were talking before we started the webinar about, we just don't know. When will things open up? When will they not open up? Are we going to go backwards before we go forward? We care so much about our communities and about our businesses that we serve. The stress is real. And, you're here today because you probably recognize that. So you might be on the road to burnout if you say some of these things. Every day is a bad day. You're exhausted all the time. You're so out of balance that sometimes you absolutely cannot take a breath. You feel like you're that elephant sitting on you, that you cannot possibly do everything on your to-do list that you have to do because you're working at home. Many of you on the call today are homeschooling for the first time ever. And kudos to you that are those of you that are doing that. I find it hard some days, and it's just me and my husband and our dog here. But you're homeschooling, you're co-working with a spouse or family members, you're juggling all the things, you're having to cook multiple times a day because the restaurants are closed. All of that is so critical right now. So sometimes it can be overwhelming and you might be on that road to burnout. Here are just a few things that I thought of with COVID-19, some of the stresses. First of all, we're always connected. We're always working because now our work is at home. Some of you, depending on where you are, may have been able in the last couple of weeks to go back to the office some, but we're always connected. Even if you are back at work, you've got your cell phone in your hand, you've got your iPad with you, your laptop. You're working too much without enough time for socializing and relaxing because all of the things we used to do are closed now. We can go out, all of us are taking more walks than we've ever taken before, but we can't go to the beach. We can't go out to dinner and socialize with friends or even have a dinner party. Those are things that we used to do to help us relax or to shut our brains down a little bit, and we can't do those things now. So we've taken on a lot of responsibilities, some that weren't even yours 12 weeks ago. Now you're the main resource for your communities, for the business community, and people are calling you wanting to know, why can't we open up our business? Why can't we get back to normal? Why can't we do this or do that? When it's not your responsibility, but all of a sudden it is. I've already mentioned the not getting enough sleep, and some of those are the reasons why we're not sleeping. Being expected to be too many things to too many people. Chambers, as you know, you get that anyway. On a good day, in a time when we don't have COVID, you're expected to do a lot of things for a lot of people. That worry and that change is tremendous right now because we just don't know what's happening and what will happen. So the change and the unknown of what that change might be is tremendous. So this is something I keep on my office wall and have for years. A friend of mine shared this with me one time when I was going through something. Don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And it's kind of one of my mantras, if you will, of I always try to keep that in mind of, you know, if I'm spinning out of control, or if I am doing too much and I start to feel that elephant sitting on me, like I can't do one more thing, I usually stop and say, who's putting that pressure on me? And most of the time, I have to tell you, it's usually me. And I'm saying, no one told me I had to do that in the next 5 minutes. No one told me the deadline is tomorrow. You know, I'm self imposing those deadlines on myself. And sometimes I just sit back and say, why am I catching myself on fire to help someone else when I could just set the expectation and say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get to that right now. I'll be able to get to it at the end of the week. And it takes so much pressure off by just keeping that, you know, front of mind of who's putting that pressure on you. So this is one of my favorite ones too. We can't make everybody happy. You know, we're not a taco, and tacos make everybody happy, no matter what you put in them. And chamber folks, we are people pleasers. We like to make people happy. We like to say yes. And sometimes the answer has to be no. And that's hard for us. Those of us that are in the business, and those of you, and there's many on the call today that are really, really good at what you do, because you make people happy and you make people feel like you're working for them all the time, because you are. But we also have to keep in mind that sometimes we just have to be able to not take that pressure and not take the criticism when somebody says we didn't do something right or we're not doing enough. And I've heard from some of my chamber friends recently over the last couple of weeks, I've heard, you know, some of you have gotten those phone calls of saying, what more can the chamber do for us? Why aren't you doing more? Now, many of you are getting the congratulations and the thank yous and the appreciation that you deserve. I wish everybody on this call today, I hope all of you have received some of those, because those are the ones we tend to not hear the loudest. The ones we hear the loudest are the ones that are the negative voices in our ear. I would encourage you to think about the positives. And, you know, if you get a note from a member that says, thank you for all you're doing, we appreciate you and your team, you know, make copies of it, put it up on your wall, send it around, take a picture of it on your phone to remember, and pull it up when you need to, that you are actually hearing the positives, because again, the negatives are so much easier to hear sometimes than the positive, and we've got to remember to hear those positives. I did not do this slide. I saw this probably in week 2 or so of our stay-at-home order, and someone, I think I saw it on Instagram, and I swiped it from there and have shared it. But you know, I printed this out as just a reminder to myself that I can only control the things that I can control, and I've got to let the others go. And you might see some of these that you know, I just last night saw a chamber exec on Facebook that was so upset about others not following the rules of social distancing. And luckily, she did eventually come around to realizing, you know what, I can't control that. All I can do is not go to that place where it's happening, where I don't feel comfortable, or where my family doesn't feel safe. I can only control my own social distancing. And knowing the difference, and you may very well want to add some things to this that you cannot control, or maybe things you can control, and focus on those, because at the end of the day, we can only do what we can do, and we can only control what we can control. So we're going to get into the steps now, and want to just encourage you again to jot down 3 things that you want to do. You might feel great today, and maybe you want to pick 5 things, or maybe you want to do all 10. But just start with 3 and pick those things, and try to focus on making some slight changes in the right direction on these items. So tip 1, I learned this from an ex-boss of mine, and I would even say it can most days be a lifesaver for me. Start and end each day with at least 1 hour of no electronics. And some of you just tuned out as soon as I said that. Might have even dropped off the webinar because you think, I can't do that. When I first wake up in the morning, I've got to get my emails to see what I need to tackle for the day. When I was at Constant Contact, I remember being shocked one time when we saw the um, the most opened emails that went out during a day were between the hours of 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. And that's shocking that so many people are reading their emails at that time of day before their feet even hit the ground. But I would encourage you to try to start, maybe just in the beginning, start with either the morning or the evening, um, 1 hour without those electronics. Go back to an old school book or even go back to a Kindle, which is an electronic, but at least you can't easily get to the Google machine, which is where I tend to spend a lot of my useless time online, is just Googling things that I never even thought I ever needed to know. But just making sure that you can start your day, take care of your priorities at home in the morning. The emails are going to be there when you finally do get to your email. And at night, let them just sit. They'll be there the next day when you get them. One thing that has helped my family is not taking our cell phones actually to bed at night and leaving them somewhere else in the house plugged in to charge, and just taking that out of our way. So it's easy to do, but yet one of the hardest, which is why I wanted to start with that one because I know it's going to be a challenge for some. So many people, this is what we look like when we go to bed or when we wake up. And it's ruining us, to be honest, in my opinion. I think we don't get solid sleep. We get upset about something, that email that we see at night or first thing in the morning, and it just starts our day off wrong because that's the first thing we see. So tip 2, set aside some time every single day to breathe. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. When I first got my iWatch, for those of you that have one might know this, but it comes with a Breathe app on it, and it was automatically set to be on. And it would upset me at first every time it would tell me to stop and breathe because I didn't have time for it. And once I started going along with it and realized, hey, this is probably a good tool, just the practice of focusing on your breathing, even for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, can change my entire outlook, and take me from being a high level stress to being able to handle the task at hand in such a better way if I have taken the time to focus on my breathing, and to actually practice. And there's a couple of apps. I've used all of them that I'm recommending here for different reasons. They're all a little bit different. You might not be a meditator. I find it hard for me that when I sit down to actually meditate, I'm not real good at it for more than a few minutes. So I find that it's easier for me to work with the breathing apps versus the meditation apps that might require or ask you to take a little longer. I tend to do a few short segments versus one longer practice of meditation. But there's a couple of apps, again, that I highly recommend that I think you would find beneficial. So here's a tip for you with the do not disturb. If you have members, and I know you do, members, volunteers, staff, sponsors that text you all hours of the day, all hours of night, all weekend, because they have your cell phone number. And sometimes they don't need an immediate response. It could have been an email that you may get later because hopefully you're not checking your email or have your notifications to come in 24 hours a day. You might, and I would encourage you to maybe consider changing that as well and having your notifications set with a time. Doesn't mean you can't go and check on them, but you're not getting those constant pinging of notifications. But the single best technology tip that has helped me throughout my last couple of years is setting my do not disturb on my iPhone. You can set up your favorites. So you can set up your spouse, your family, your kids, your best friends. You can set up your board chairman if you want. I don't recommend it. Set up your priority list. And if someone calls you, like I have mine to go to shut down at 8 o'clock at night. So after 8 o'clock, if anyone that's not on my favorite list text me, it's being held for me and it's on a do not disturb. I do not get my notification. I can see it if I go look at it, but it's not pinging me. If they try to reach you twice, then it will let the call go through. If you do, have it set up if in case of an emergency. But implementing guardrails and and first of all, just knowing if someone texts you or someone emails you, it is not an automatic need for a immediate response. Sometimes it might be, they may say, hey, Anissa, I need you to do this as soon as possible. Anissa, can you call me immediately? That's different. But what we do for ourselves is we put that sense of emergency on ourselves as soon as we send an email. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I emailed a chamber CEO about some information, and I had a question to push back to her to ask a question. And 24 minutes later, she responded back to me and apologized for the delay in responding to me and explained to me what her day was like and how stressed, and that she was so sorry it took so long to get back to me. And y'all, it was 24 minutes and nothing in my email had said, I need this immediately. She had put that pressure on herself, and we do that to ourselves. And you can put those guardrails in place, like your do not disturb on your phone. Just because someone has your cell phone number and texts you does not mean that it's an emergency. I understand 100% you wanting to be responsive. But we as a society, in my opinion, have gotten to a place where we think everything is an emergency and everything requires that immediate response. And that's not always the case. I think most of the time we've put that onus on ourselves to be stressed about that sense of emergency. So, tip 4, give your team permission to take care of themselves. This is more about your team than it is about yourself, but some of these could be helpful for you as well. But just giving your team permission right now, more so than ever, to take care of themselves and their family. Understanding that people are working in really unique situations. Some people don't even have a home office. They are sitting at their kitchen counter trying to pull off a work day with kids in the background doing their homework and dogs barking at every UPS truck. And, we've got to be a little lenient right now. I've been on a couple of webinars recently when dogs have barked or the presenter gets sidetracked. Sometimes it's me. But just, being forgiving and understanding that these are unique times and it doesn't make someone less of a professional or mean that they care less. They're doing the very best they can to get through the day and do their job. Being aware as a manager, if you're the CEO of a chamber, be aware of when you call or email your staff, because if you call them or email them at 10 o'clock on a Saturday, they're going to think they need to respond to you. If you're just knocking out some work because you're choosing to spend your weekend doing that, it's not a bad thing to put in the subject line, um, do not need response. Or even in the subject, say, hey, I'm just working some this weekend. Do not expect you to respond. Monday is fine. Setting the tone for the expectation will go a long way with your staff, because if you email them or text them after hours or on weekends, they're gonna want to do the right thing, or in their mind the right thing, and get back to you. So do as you say. They're watching you, they're taking your lead. If you're the manager of people, they are watching to see, if you're working harder than you've ever been, and I suspect you are, they're going to want to work hard. If we're being real honest with each other, people are scared for their jobs right now because, we don't know what our budgets are going to look like. They want to be, given some confidence. They want to be, they want some transparent information. They want to not be left in the dark, but they're watching you and taking your lead. So if you are giving them permission to take care of yourself, or you're taking care of yourself and giving them permission, it's a lot easier for them to understand. Trust them, empower them. The first couple of weeks that folks were stay at home, there was some talk going around, and people were saying, hey, how do you keep up with your staff at home? Are you requiring them to log, in 10-minute increments, how they're spending their day, what they're doing? You've hired good people. You're a good manager. Trust them to do their jobs and empower them to do it the way that they think is best. Some people, as we all know, some people work at home a lot better than others. I've been work at home now for many years, and so it was not that big of a shift for me. It's a big shift that I'm on day 64, and I actually know what day it is because I'm counting. It's a shift in that I can't wait to get back out there. But I'm working at home okay. But some folks, this is their first time at it. And we've got to be a little lenient and let them understand that, um, you trust them to do what they're supposed to do. Their productivity will prove that, and their output will prove that their work is there. In many, many cases, I'm a firm believer in that most folks are even more productive because they feel that struggle with the work-life balance at home, and they actually end up working even longer hours. And as we've been home without our social and relaxation time away, we even have more hours. There's only so much Netflix we can watch, so we may even pick up our laptops on weekends and do some work. So I expect that they're working, but just know that they are watching you and watching you to take your lead. Tip 5, not being afraid to ask for help or to take a day off. Being able to go to your chair and say, your chair or your boss, if you're on the staff position, of saying, you know what, I need a day. I need to just disconnect, spend some time with the kids, take a day off. I've got to run some errands. I've got to do some things. I need some quiet time. Don't be afraid to kind of raise that flag if you get to the point where you're just done, because quite honestly, I've seen quite a few folks um, and our peers saying over the last couple of weeks, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I can't, take the negativity. People are asking for things I can't provide. The unknown is catching up to me. And usually, just stepping back and taking some time will help us all. This is one of my favorite tips. Tip 6 is to find that mantra. Find it for you, find it for your team. you know what is that? Maybe you come up with the mantra of the team together. And what does that look like? Is it, we are thankful, we're thankful to have our community and our business community, we can do this, we've got this. And having that mantra for yourself as well as your team, and just that constant reminder of, this is how we're going to approach things. One of my mantras has always been, and this came from my time at Girls on the Run when I was the CEO there. Our founder, Molly Barker, actually used to say, um, always assume positive intent. And that has just kind of stuck with me now, that when I get somebody on the phone and they're upset, they can't pay their dues, or somebody is really stressed about something and they don't know what's going to happen with them or their staff, and they're taking it out on me, I just try to remind myself, assume positive intent. They're coming from a place that I can't understand, and I can try to understand. But that's kind of worked for me. But you need to find your own that works for you, and find your own that works for your team. Some of you have this mantra. I've seen this. I've heard this quite a few times over the last couple of months. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Um, you know, some days that's okay to have that as your, if that's what it takes to get you through the day. Some days it is what it is. Um, but you've got to have fun with it too, and just deal with it the best you can, and find that sense of humor, because a sense of humor is going to take us a long, long way. Tip 7, disconnecting for the day. an entire day, just totally disconnecting from your cell phone, from your iWatch, from your laptop, you know, picking up that book, spending time outside the best you can right now, but just totally disconnecting. And, if you feel like you need to, you can tell people, shout it from the mountaintops, I'm going off the grid. You know, if you need me and if it's an emergency, this is how you can reach me. But otherwise, I am disconnecting. And it really, really helps. And I would bet if I, again, could see all of you and ask you to raise your hands, if I ask many of you would say that you haven't disconnected in years, maybe, since we have started walking around with our cell phones in the palm of our hands. It's hard to disconnect because that is, first and foremost, I'm thankful for the connectivity. Look where we would be if we didn't have Zoom calls right now, or our emails and social media, and as a way to connect with people that we would love to be in person with but can't. Some of you have family that are in nursing homes or in hospital care that you cannot go see right now. So the connection is huge, but plan it when you can and make it happen. Because if you can just take one whole day, start even with a half day if you have to, you're gonna come out from that day with such a better outlook and that clearness of, it wasn't so bad once the shake stopped happening. You can do it. I promise you. So Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Saying no when you need to say no. Um, I think it slowed down maybe a little bit, but those first 8 weeks for me, um, I am a self-proclaimed ambivert. And if you don't know what that is, you might want to look that up. I think from my, um, self research that I've done, there's a lot of chamber presidents and chamber staffs that are actually not extroverts. They are either introverts or they're ambiverts, which means you can balance the extrovert and introvert. And once I realized that's what I am, it has made my life better, immensely better, because now I know when I need to step back and go into my introvert space, because I can be an extrovert for hours and hours and hours on end, but it comes a time when I need to step back and say, no more Zooms, because I was doing them for work, and then I'm doing them with friends and family and gatherings and happy hours. And sometimes you just have to say, I can't fit that in today. And being able to say no when you need to say no, sometimes it helps to just turn the camera off and not be on the camera side of things. And if you don't believe me, if you haven't heard of this, all you have to do is Google Zoom fatigue. And in the short time that we've been dealing with this, there are already so many articles out there about Zoom fatigue being real. And keep that in mind for your staff, for your volunteers, for your members, that you need to have that connectivity, and you're trying to replace so many events with virtual events, and you're trying to keep that connectivity going. But keep in mind that the fatigue right now is a real thing, and just giving yourself the ability to say, I can't do it tonight or today. I need to take a Zoom free day. So tip 9, listen to your body, listen to your mind, take a nap when you need to, go sit in your car. Sometimes I have my work mail comes to a UPS box, which is where we get our work mail here at my house. And my husband will tell you, sometimes when I go pick up the mail from UPS once a week, I might not come home for 30 or 40 minutes. I just drive around by myself in my car, listening to my loud music, to just break it up a little bit, have a few minutes by myself. Um, Everybody's taking a lot of walks these days, hopefully, but just knowing and listening to yourself, and knowing when you need to step back and unplug, because unplugging, again, much like the disconnecting of your electronics for a while, but sometimes it doesn't have to be for a whole day. It can just be 10 minutes, 20 minutes of stepping back and taking time to unplug. This is my favorite by far, and I can't believe I'm even sharing this, but I shared it on Instagram, so I'm sharing it here. If you'll see that little handwritten note, that was actually my day, Monday and Tuesday, and I scheduled a dance party, and I've been doing that for a couple of years at the suggestion of a friend, and it has helped me so much during this lockdown. Of at the end of the day, when I am zoomed out, I'm emailed out, I've got worry like everybody else. Sometimes you just need to dance it out. And I decided to share my dance party playlist with you. So if you're on Spotify, you can find it there. It's kid friendly. I believe it's kid friendly as I say that, but a lot of good tunes there, 1 hour exactly. And you can just put on your earbuds or turn it up loud and dance it out. And you will not believe, Ellen DeGeneres has been doing that for years on her show. And there is absolutely something to it as far as helping with the stress level and really taking care of yourself and dancing it out. So I hope that helps. But all of those, again, just 10 tips, if you can just implement a couple of them, and I think you will find that you're going to be a much better stress, maybe not stress free, because the stress is going to be here a while. We've got to be real with ourselves on that. It's a different level of stress, but there are ways that we can handle it. This is a slide, a brand that maybe some of our friends from the Huntsville, Alabama Chamber are on the call with us today, but I borrowed this from their branding marketing campaign that they put together, and I love it because we truly are all in this together. As a profession, this is going to test our industry more than ever, probably. And you are working so hard and so many hours, but call out to your peers. Don't be afraid to schedule some time with somebody to talk one-on-one, to just say, hey, how are you dealing with this? How are you feeling about this? Ask for the help that you need, because we truly are all in this together, and we'll be able to get through it and come out even better and even stronger on the other side. And I would love for you to connect with me. Susan mentioned this at the beginning, that these are the ways that you can find me. Please, I encourage you to connect with me. But most of all, I would encourage you to, give yourself permission to take some time for yourself. You're doing great, great work every day that is so critically important to your communities and to the businesses that you serve, and really the community at large. The work is so important, but so is your life. And it's just critical for you to give yourself permission, give your staff permission to take some time for themselves. Be kind to yourself, be kind to your team. On days when you're not so kind, recognize that, and don't be afraid to own it and say, you know what, I wasn't so kind yesterday, and it's because I'm stressed, and this is where it's coming from. And just owning that will help you in the long run. But just know that you're doing the important work, and take care of yourself. And if you can put a few of these tips into place, I think you'll find that you'll start to feel the stress lessen just a little bit. And I'm going to turn it back over to Susan. I'm not sure if we have any questions or not, but I am happy to take as many as we have time for.
Okay, thank you so much, Anissa. That really, really inspirational and great tips. I definitely wrote down your dance party stress relief Spotify playlist, and that may be my playlist for my afternoon walk today.
Absolutely.
We here at ACC all echo what Anissa said. We are privileged to serve you guys in this time and support your important work for the community. And we hope that you're taking care of yourselves, and we hope also that you check in with us if you need support in your work during this time. If you have questions, please go ahead and type them in the question box. We do have a few, here. And so, Anissa, I'm just going to start at the top. The
Okay.
first one is kind of a serious one. This person wants advice on language for when coming back to work after the passing of a family member due to COVID-19, so that members know to be sensitive. I'm not sure if that means a staff member coming back to work. I guess that is what she means.
Yeah. And if it's okay, I would like to ask that person to please email me directly. I'd love to find out a little bit more, and happy to help craft that kind of language and response that I would recommend. I need a little bit of time to think about that and a little bit more information, but happy to help. So if you'll just email me at astarnes@acce.org, I'm happy to work with you on that.
Okay. Thank you, Anissa. Let's see here. A couple questions on accessing the recording so bosses can hear and rest of team members. I will be posting this on our ACCE webinar page, basically acce.org/webinar, and it should be up by Monday, if not tomorrow. I usually get to it within 24 hours, but 2 business days. So it'll be there along with Anissa's slides. Let me see. How do you implement these tips with your team?
Yeah, I would recommend, if your team is not on the call with you today, I would recommend that you can even play it online while you're all on Zoom. You can give it to them individually to watch on their own, and then have a Zoom call to discuss it. Maybe even I've done a similar presentation, although not this exact one, but I've done a similar one on stress before, and I've grouped people in tables, and they actually talked about which tips that they're going to try to adopt, which 3, and they have an accountability partner to do check-ins to say, how are you doing on that? And you have to know your team and know their personalities to know if they'd be willing to be open to something like that. But I think sharing it with your team and having an open discussion, and if you're the leader of your team, talking about which steps you're going to start implementing first, so that they can hold you accountable for it, and just being honest and upfront and transparent as to these are things I'd like to see our team work on and do a little better with. So watching the presentation together or sharing it and then talking about it.
Okay, and there's someone else also who has a question about something similar to share with members. And so Anissa, I assume she should reach out to you or contact
Yeah,
you, talk through that as well.
sure. Happy to do that.
Here's a question on, let me see. Any ideas on employee engagement while working from home?
Yeah, there are so many great things out there for employee engagement. As a matter of fact, when I was looking for a resource for this presentation, I came across some just on Google that you can just, I don't mean to be so flippant about that, but just to Google the employee engagement virtual, because there's some great games out there, lighthearted, icebreakers of, share your fun fact with your team, or what's the best thing that happened at your house this week. What's I saw one earlier that said, what is the number one phrase that is being said over and over and over at your home right now? And some of the answers were hilarious. So, it doesn't have to be always just, getting on a Zoom and doing a check-in. It can be, engaging. You can have, I saw a group, although they weren't a chamber group, it was another company. They did a dog Zoom happy hour last week, and everybody brought their pets, dogs, cats, anything like that that you can do, but keeping it lighthearted. I would also tell you, back to the Zoom fatigue, sometimes you might want to just say, you know what, here's an hour back of your life. We're not going to get together this week, and want you to spend that hour doing something for yourself, whether it, again, taking a walk, or or reading a book or whatever it is, but just being aware of how much you're requiring. I talked to one chamber exec a couple of weeks ago that was requiring their staff to get on in the morning and the afternoon, as soon as they got to work and at the end of the day. And he asked my opinion of it, and I told him, I said, I think you're killing your staff by doing that. It's too much pressure to have to get together that much if it's not necessary. That to me was just, you just wanted to see their faces to make sure they were doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if that's the case, you might have a bigger issue at hand. But just take it from your team, let your team come up with it. I would even kind of share it around and let your team members come up with something fun that they want to do together. There's a couple of games out there. Our family has played some virtual games together. There's one called Jackbox that you can download on. It's an app that you play on your phone, but you can play together via Zoom, and that's fun. And I know there's some others out there as well.
Yeah, we've used Jackbox too, Anissa, with our family, and my husband leads a large department, not chamber, but he did a daily question based on one of the Jackbox games and had a little competition going.
Oh, I love that.
And it was really popular. It's a group of engineers, and but there was a lot of creativity and engagement based on that game. So
Yeah.
I like that
Yeah,
a lot.
it's a lot of fun.
And then one final thought, someone texted in that, not a question, but they did mention that they're going to use these tips with volunteers and board members who they work closely with, and encourages others to share with volunteers as well, because in many chambers, volunteers are doing so much of the work, and they need to care for themselves as well at this
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. And very good point. And I think some others may take you up on that advice and share with their volunteers as well.
I guess two quick things just came in. Can you share the breathing app you mentioned? I believe that's in the slide. It was Headspace and some others, right?
Yeah, there's Calm, CALM, Headspace, 10% Happier, which that actually is a book as well, but it's an app as well. And then I personally use my iWatch. The iWatch from Apple comes with a breathing app installed that's in the health app, I believe, on the iWatch, but it's automatically set and it pings me a couple of times a day and reminds me to take a few deep breaths and you can set it for 30 seconds or 2 minutes or however long you want to do the deep breathing, but it's a great reminder.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, can you share some tips to help true extroverts manage the new normal of remote working?
Yeah, I might not be the best one for that because as I mentioned, I'm not. People think of me that know me as an extrovert, but I'm really not. But yeah, I've had some of my friends talk to me about that are extroverts, and they have really struggled with being at home, and they are doing more of the Zoom happy hours and the Zoom gatherings. And I have one girlfriend that's doing Zoom painting classes with another group. And book clubs and things, think of just like you're trying to transition some of your events at the chamber and you're taking them from real life events to virtual events. Think of things you do in your real life that you might be able to take virtually or pick up, new things like a book club or a painting class or things that you can do. But the one thing is just making sure that you're reaching out, making sure that you're connecting, because it can be stressful if you're not in your norm. So if you're an extrovert that's used to that level of activity and level of participation with groups of people, it can be really, really hard. So I would encourage you to just look for things that you can do on a constant basis to make sure that you're keeping that level of connectivity at least to where it's not causing you stress.
Okay, great advice. And then finally, the name of your Spotify playlist. It's Stress Relief Dance Party, right?
It is Stress Relief Dance Party, and it's just under my name, Anissa Freeman Starnes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you again, Anissa, and thank you to everyone who took the time to join today. We really appreciate your participation, your great questions, and above all, what you're doing right now for your chambers and your community and your team. We are behind you all the way here at ACCE, and really privileged to serve you guys at this time. Final reminder, the webinar is being recorded. I'll post the recording again by Monday, if not by tomorrow, and I'll include Anissa's presentation slides as well. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful, restful afternoon. Take some time off, and we will see you all on the next ACCE webinar. Bye-bye.